My mother-in-law humiliated me for being broke and kicked me out, not knowing I make $100,000 a month. The day I decided to hide my wealth was the same day I realized how tired I was of being loved for my money. It was a Tuesday afternoon at a trendy San Francisco coffee shop when Michael, my boyfriend of 8 months, casually mentioned our future vacation plans to Bali. "Your treat, of course," he added with a wink, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Something inside me went still. His words hung in the air between us, revealing a pattern I'd been ignoring for months. The expensive dinners he suggested, but never offered to pay for. The casual comments about my lucky break in tech. The way his eyes lit up when I mentioned my investment portfolio. I ended things with Michael that afternoon, walking away from the relationship with a clarity that had been building for years. Money changes how people see you. It distorts every interaction, every relationship, until you're never quite sure if people want you or what you can give them. That night, I sat on the balcony of my Pacific Heights apartment, watching fog roll in over the Golden Gate Bridge, and made a decision that would change my life. I, Leah Morgan, with my 8-figure net worth and growing tech portfolio, would start over. Not financially. I wasn't about to abandon the security I'd fought so hard to build, but socially. I would live simply. I would be judged for who I was, not what I owned. 6 months later, I moved into a modest apartment in Oakland, drove a reliable but unimpressive used Volvo, and carefully curated a wardrobe that was neither cheap nor flashy. I took consulting gigs that interested me, working remotely for startups while managing my substantial investments behind the scenes. My new friends knew me as hardworking, thoughtful Leah, who lived comfortably but certainly wasn't wealthy. I met Ethan at a friend's barbecue on a surprisingly warm February afternoon. He was grilling, sleeves rolled up, a smudge of charcoal on his cheek, laughing as he flipped burgers. What struck me first wasn't his obvious good looks, though with his warm brown eyes and easy smile, he had those in spades, but the genuine interest he took in everyone around him. "You must be Leah," he said when our mutual friend introduced us. "I've heard you give excellent book recommendations. I'm in desperate need of something that isn't about corporate law." He grimaced playfully. "Save me from another night of reading case studies?" That afternoon turned to evening, and by midnight, we were still talking on our friend's porch, wrapped in borrowed blankets against the Bay Area chill. Ethan was intelligent without being pretentious, passionate about his work as an environmental lawyer without making it his entire personality. And when I vaguely mentioned I worked in consulting, he asked about the challenges I found most interesting, not how much I made or which high-profile clients I served. 3 months into dating Ethan, I realized I was falling in love. 6 months in, I knew I'd never felt this way about anyone before. And 9 months in, when he nervously asked if I'd be willing to meet his family, I said yes, without hesitation. "Just a warning," he said, running a hand through his hair the way he did when he was anxious. "My mom can be intense. She has very specific ideas about, well, everything." "I'm sure she's lovely," I replied, squeezing his hand. "And if she raised you, we'll definitely find common ground." I couldn't have been more wrong. Victoria Hamilton Green swept into the restaurant 20 minutes late for our first meeting, trailing designer perfume and judgmental glances. She air-kissed Ethan on both cheeks before turning to assess me with the clinical precision of a jeweler evaluating a questionable diamond. "So this is the consultant," she said, making my profession sound like a euphemism for something unsavory. "Interesting choice of shoes, dear. Very practical." I glanced down at my simple black flats, good quality leather, just not adorned with a recognizable designer logo, and smiled. "Thank you. I believe comfort and function can coexist with style." Her tight smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course they can. For some people." That lunch set the tone for our relationship. Victoria, I quickly learned, measured everyone by their observable wealth, social connections, and utility to her ambitions. As the widow of a banking executive and a prominent figure in San Francisco's charity circuit, she had cultivated a life of carefully curated privilege. And in her world, I was a puzzling intrusion, the woman with no impressive family connections, no distinguished career achievements she could brag about, and no obvious wealth for her son to benefit from. What Victoria couldn't see, what I had deliberately hidden, was that I could have bought and sold her social circle 10 times over. My early investment in a healthcare AI startup had multiplied exponentially when it was acquired by Google. The fintech platform I'd helped build had revolutionized microloans across developing markets. My portfolio generated more in monthly returns than Victoria's late husband had made in a year. But Ethan didn't know any of that. And as I watched Victoria dismiss me over lunch with calculated barbs about my modest background, I made another decision. I wouldn't reveal my wealth just to impress his mother. If Victoria couldn't see my worth beyond a bank balance, that was her loss. What I didn't anticipate was how persistent she would be in her campaign to show Ethan he was settling. Or how creative she would become in her attempts to humiliate me. Or that one day, her actions would push me past the careful boundaries I had built around my true identity. That day was coming, and neither Victoria nor Ethan was prepared for what would happen when it arrived. Victoria's campaign against me began as a series of small cuts. The first time Ethan took me to Sunday brunch at his mother's Presidio Heights home, she greeted me with a practiced smile and a once-over that lingered on my simple gold stud earrings. "How quaint," she said, touching her own diamond drops. I remember when I wore costume jewelry in college. My earrings were 18-karat gold from a small jeweler in Barcelona. Modest by choice, not necessity, but I simply smiled. They were a gift to myself after a project went well. Beside me, Ethan squeezed my hand, a silent apology for his mother's behavior. I squeezed back, letting him know it was fine. I'd dealt with far worse negotiating 8-figure deals with men who assumed I was someone's assistant. The brunch was elegant but cold, like Victoria herself. The table was set with antique Limoges china and crystal that caught the sunlight streaming through the bay windows. We were joined by Victoria's friend Diane, a sharp-featured woman with a surgical smile who served on 3 charity boards with Victoria. "Ethan tells us you drive a Volvo," Diane asked, making it sound like I'd arrived on a donkey cart. "How European of you." "It's reliable," I replied, taking a sip of perfectly chilled champagne. I've never understood using a car as a status symbol. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. "Well, some of us appreciate quality and craftsmanship. Though I suppose when you're on a consultant's budget, practicality comes first." She emphasized consultant the same way she always did, as if it were a euphemism for unemployed. I bit back a laugh, thinking of the conference call I'd taken yesterday about a potential acquisition of one of my health tech startups, a deal that would likely add another $20 million to my portfolio. "Speaking of cars," Victoria continued, turning to Ethan, "Charles Winfield's daughter just got engaged to a wonderful boy from the Schuyler family. Investment banking. He surprised her with a Porsche for their engagement." The implication hung in the air like stale perfume. Ethan frowned slightly. "That's excessive, don't you think?" "Generosity is never excessive, darling," Victoria replied, cutting her quiche with surgical precision. These little digs became routine, comments about my practical clothes, questions about when I might find a real career, suggestions that perhaps I was using Ethan for his family's connections. Each one delivered with a smile so practiced that people who didn't know better might mistake it for warmth. After 6 months of dating, Ethan invited me to move into his Oakland apartment. It was a beautiful space with exposed brick and windows overlooking Lake Merritt, but modest compared to my hidden holdings. I loved that about him, his satisfaction with having enough rather than excess. The night I moved in, Victoria called. "Ethan tells me you're playing house now," she said, her voice tight with disapproval. "How modern." In my day, there were certain steps before cohabitation. "Times change," I replied lightly, "but our commitment doesn't need traditional validation." "Well, I suppose when one doesn't bring much to the table financially, moving in does save on rent." I could have told her about the 3 properties I owned across the Bay Area. Instead, I said, "Ethan and I share expenses equally," and changed the subject. As our relationship deepened, Victoria's tactics evolved. She began excluding me from family events, then acting surprised when Ethan brought me anyway. She'd forget to set a place for me at dinner, or schedule mother-son outings that mysteriously expanded to include everyone except me. At Ethan's cousin's wedding, Victoria seated me at a table with distant relatives while she kept Ethan at the family table, parading a succession of suitable women past him all night. When I approached to ask him to dance, she intercepted me. "Leah, dear, you might want to powder your nose. This humidity is doing nothing for your complexion." She leaned in, lowering her voice. And perhaps a breath mint? The salmon starter was rather pungent. That was the first time I saw her tactics for what they truly were, not just snobbery but deliberate humiliation. Not just preference for a different partner for her son, but active hostility toward me. What Victoria didn't understand was that I'd built my fortune by recognizing patterns and having infinite patience. Silicon Valley isn't kind to women who react emotionally. I'd learned to wait, observe, and strike strategically when the moment was right. So I continued smiling through her barbs. I brought thoughtful hostess gifts she dismissed as quaint. I engaged politely with her friends even as they exchanged knowing glances over my head. And I watched as Ethan became increasingly uncomfortable, caught between his love for me and his complicated relationship with his mother. "I'm sorry about her," became his refrain, whispered in cars after painful dinners or texted after particularly cutting phone calls. "She's always been controlling, but this is next level." "It's not your fault," I would reply, meaning it. "She loves you and wants what she thinks is best." What I didn't say was that I understood Victoria better than she could imagine. We were both strategists, both protective of what we valued, both accustomed to getting our way. The difference was I had nothing to prove, and ultimately, that made me more dangerous than she could possibly know. I just needed the right moment to show her exactly who she'd been underestimating. And as summer turned to fall and Victoria's annual charity gala approached, I sensed that moment was coming, faster and with more impact than either of us expected. "Are you sure you want to go?" Ethan asked, adjusting his tie in our bedroom mirror. "We could skip it. Say I caught a cold." I smoothed the front of my black dress, a perfectly tailored Armani piece with no visible branding. To Victoria, it would look like a department store find. To anyone with a trained eye, its exceptional cut spoke volumes. "It's important to your mother," I said, pinning my hair into a simple updo. "Besides, I've never been one to back down from a challenge." Ethan sighed, coming up behind me to place his hands on my shoulders. "You shouldn't have to feel like attending a dinner party is entering a battlefield." If only he knew how much I thrived on battlefields. Not that I sought conflict, but years of being underestimated in boardrooms had taught me to stand my ground with a smile. "It's just dinner," I said, reaching up to touch his hand. "For you, I can handle one night of your mother's charity crowd." The charity in question was Victoria's pride and joy, the Bay Area Cultural Heritage Foundation, which primarily funded arts programs for underprivileged children. Noble in theory, though from what I'd gathered, Victoria saw it more as a networking vehicle than a true philanthropic endeavor. Tonight's dinner wasn't the main gala, but a planning event for major donors and committee members. Victoria had extended a reluctant invitation to Ethan, and guessed after he insisted on my inclusion. When our Uber pulled up to the Pacific Heights mansion where the dinner was being held, I felt Ethan tense beside me. "You look beautiful," he whispered, helping me out of the car. "And brilliant and kind, and everything my mother refuses to see." My heart squeezed. Despite everything, Ethan never wavered in his support. He'd stood up to Victoria countless times on my behalf, though I often discouraged it. This wasn't a battle he could win for me. The mansion belonged to the Andersons, old money friends of Victoria's who had the distinction of being even more pretentious than she was. Crystal chandeliers sparkled over marble floors, and waitstaff circulated with trays of champagne and canapes that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. Victoria spotted us immediately, her smile tightening at the edges when she saw me. She wore a heavily beaded Marchesa gown that probably cost as much as a decent used car, her neck dripping with diamonds. "Ethan, darling, you're finally here," she cooed, air-kissing his cheeks before giving me a once-over. "And Leah, how sensible you look." "Thank you for including me," I said pleasantly. "The venue is stunning." Isn't it? The Andersons just renovated. A cool $5 million, I believe. She linked her arm through Ethan's. Come, sweetheart. Harrison Fullerton is desperate to talk to you about that environmental initiative his firm is sponsoring. I was left standing alone as Victoria whisked Ethan away. Classic divide and conquer tactics. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing server and took a moment to survey the room. About 60 people milled around, all wearing designer labels and family heirlooms, discussing vacation homes and boarding schools with practiced nonchalance. I recognized several tech moguls and at least one billionaire hedge fund manager I'd negotiated with years ago. He wouldn't recognize me now. Back then, I'd worn power suits and had my game face on. Tonight, I was just an unremarkable woman in a black dress. You must be Ethan's friend, came a voice beside me. A woman in her 50s with a surgically tightened face peered at me through heavy mascara. Victoria's mentioned you. Leah Morgan. I offer my hand. And you are? Celeste Whitford. I chair the auction committee with Victoria. She barely touched my fingers before withdrawing. What is it you do again? Consulting, I replied, my standard answer. How fascinating, she said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. And what exactly do you consult on? Before I could answer, I heard Victoria's laugh, a little too loud, a little too pointed, from across the room. She stood with Ethan and a stunning blonde woman, her hand resting intimately on the woman's arm. Rebecca just made partner at Goldman Sachs, I overheard Victoria saying. Youngest female partner in the firm's history. I always knew she was destined for greatness since her debutante days. Ethan's posture was rigid, his smile forced. I started to move toward them, but Celeste placed a hand on my arm. I wouldn't, she said, something like pity in her eyes. Victoria has been hoping to rekindle things between those two for years. Best not to interfere when she's on a mission. I gently removed her hand. I think I'll take my chances. As I approached, Victoria's eyes flicked to me, a flash of irritation crossing her features before her social mask slipped back into place. Leah, there you are. We were just discussing Rebecca's new summer home in Napa. Her family has owned the neighboring vineyard for generations. How lovely, I said, slipping my hand into Ethan's. I've always thought Napa was beautiful. Victoria's smile tightened. Have you been? I wouldn't think it was in your range of experiences. Ethan tensed. Mother. It's all right, I interrupted softly. I've been fortunate enough to visit a few times. The dinner gong saved us from further conversation. As we moved toward the dining room, I overheard Victoria loudly whispering to her friend, that one's either broke or clueless. Either way, she won't last. Dining room seating had me placed at the far end of the table from Ethan, sandwiched between a corpulent banking executive who spoke exclusively about his golf handicap and an elderly woman who kept falling asleep between courses. I endured 3 hours of subtle snubs and pointed exclusion from conversations. Victoria made sure to repeatedly highlight Rebecca's accomplishments, financial success, and apparent compatibility with Ethan. By the time dessert arrived, a strange calm had settled over me. I'd reached the limit of what I was willing to tolerate, not for my sake, but for Ethan's. He looked miserable, caught in his mother's manipulations while trying to signal apologetic glances my way. As coffee was being served, Victoria made her move. She clinked her glass, drawing the table's attention. Before we conclude, I want to thank everyone for supporting our foundation. With your help, our annual gala next month will be our most successful yet. She beamed around the table, especially with the addition of the Fullerton Group sponsorship, which Rebecca helped secure. The table applauded politely. Victoria wasn't finished. Now, I'd like to propose a toast to connections that strengthen our community and our future. Her eyes fixed pointedly on Ethan and Rebecca as she raised her glass. After dinner, Victoria cornered us in the hallway as guests began departing. Ethan, she said, her voice lowered but perfectly audible, you deserve someone who contributes something, not a woman who lives off your generosity. That was the moment, the line she shouldn't have crossed. I felt a strange stillness come over me as Victoria's words hung in the air. the kind of calm that only appears in the eye of a storm. "I appreciate your candor, Victoria," I said, my voice steady. "And thank you for dinner." I turned to Ethan, whose face had gone pale with anger. "I think it's time for me to go." "We're both going," he said firmly, reaching for my hand. Victoria's perfectly lined lips parted in surprise. She wasn't used to Ethan choosing anyone over her. "Ethan, don't be ridiculous. We haven't even discussed the family's table arrangements for the gala." "Not tonight, Mother," he cut her off, something he rarely did. "I think you've said quite enough." In the Uber ride home, Ethan apologized profusely. "I've never been so embarrassed. The way she treated you. I should have said something sooner." I placed my hand on his. "This isn't your battle to fight. But she's my mother. Her behavior reflects on me." "No," I said firmly. "Her behavior reflects on her alone." That night, after Ethan had fallen into a troubled sleep, I sat at the small desk in our bedroom and opened my laptop. The soft blue glow illuminated my face as I logged into accounts I rarely accessed in his presence. My personal email was flooded with investment updates, acquisition offers, and quarterly reports. One message caught my eye from Jessica Lee, my former colleague and now the head of my family foundation. The subject line read, "Bay Area Cultural Heritage Foundation, Sponsor Crisis." I clicked it open. "Leah, that charity you asked me to monitor, your boyfriend's mother's pet project? Their lead tech sponsor just pulled out of the gala. Apparently, the CEO got caught in a #MeToo scandal, and they're going dark on all public events. The foundation is in panic mode, scrambling to find $250,000 in sponsorship within 2 weeks or scale back significantly. Thought you'd want to know. No idea what you're planning, but I know that look you get when someone's crossed you. Jess. P.S. Your portfolio jumped another 12% this quarter. Being retired at 32 seems to be working out for you." I smiled in the darkness. Jessica knew me too well. We'd met as the only women in a venture capital incubator years ago and had formed an alliance that evolved into friendship. When I stepped back from active investing to live my simpler life, she'd taken over managing my charitable foundation, the one Victoria had no idea existed. I typed a quick reply. "Jess, perfect timing. I need you to set up a shell fund to make an anonymous donation to the BACHF Gala. $250,000. One condition, I attend as a foundation representative. No one connects it to me personally until the night of the event. Also, reach out to Neurotech. I want them as the new technology sponsor. Full digital experience package for the gala. They owe me after that Series C funding round I arranged. Leah." I closed my laptop and slipped back into bed beside Ethan. He stirred slightly, wrapping an arm around me. "Everything okay?" he murmured, half asleep. "Everything's perfect," I whispered. "Just handling some work." The next week passed in a blur of careful planning. By day, I was still just Leah, Ethan's modest girlfriend who'd been humiliated by his mother. By night, I orchestrated a takeover of Victoria's precious gala with a precision that would have impressed my former Silicon Valley colleagues. Jessica became my proxy, attending planning meetings as the representative of the Morgan Family Trust, a supposedly long-established but publicity-shy foundation that wished to remain anonymous until the night of the gala. The event committee, desperate after losing their main sponsor, accepted the $250,000 donation with minimal questions. Meanwhile, Neurotech, one of my earliest and most successful investments, agreed to provide cutting-edge technology for the event, interactive displays, a custom app for attendees, and a digital auction platform that would revolutionize Victoria's traditional paper bid sheets. 10 days after the disastrous dinner party, Victoria called Ethan. I could hear her voice through the phone as he paced our living room. "Darling, the most extraordinary thing has happened," she gushed. "An anonymous donor has saved the gala, and they're bringing in that hot new tech company, Neurotech, to modernize everything. The committee is ecstatic." Ethan glanced at me, covering the mouthpiece. "She sounds happier than I've heard her in months." I smiled. "That's wonderful. The gala means a lot to her." He uncovered the phone. "That's great news, Mom." "So you'll come?" Victoria asked. "Both of you," she added, with obvious reluctance. We wouldn't miss it, Ethan said. After he hung up, he looked at me curiously. You're being very forgiving about all this. I shrugged. The gala is important work, regardless of how I feel about your mother personally. What I didn't tell him was that Victoria's committee had no idea how completely I'd infiltrated their event. Every digital interaction, every donation, every facet of the technology they were so excited about, it all funneled data directly to me. I knew exactly how much each donor gave, who declined invitations, and what they were saying in their planning emails. I also learned that Victoria had spent the past 3 months trying to convince the event co-chair to seat me and Ethan at different tables, with Ethan next to Rebecca, of course. The afternoon before the gala, Jessica called me. Everything's set, she said. The foundation chair will acknowledge the anonymous donor during his speech and invite a representative forward. That's your cue. Perfect, I replied. And the other matter? Your dress was delivered to my apartment this morning. Victoria will never know what hit her. That evening, Ethan found me researching children's arts education on my laptop. What's all this? He asked, peering over my shoulder. Just learning more about your mother's foundation, I said. If it's important to her, and she's important to you. He kissed the top of my head. You're remarkable, you know that? After everything she's put you through, you're still trying. I closed my laptop with a smile. Everyone deserves a second chance. Even Victoria. What I didn't say was that second chances sometimes come with a lesson attached. And Victoria's was long overdue. You look different, Ethan said, his eyes widening as I emerged from our bedroom. I smiled, smoothing the midnight blue silk that hugged my body before cascading to the floor. The designer gown, Zuhair Murad, though I'd removed the label, featured a subtle constellation of crystals across the bodice that caught the light with every movement. My hair was swept up in an elegant twist, secured with diamond pins that had cost more than most cars. Good different? I asked, slipping on a pair of diamond drop earrings that would make Victoria's look like costume jewelry. Ethan shook his head in amazement. Incredible different. I've just never seen you so dressed up, I offered. I thought, for once, I'd make an effort for your mother's event. Show her I can fit in when it matters. What I didn't say was that tonight wasn't about fitting in. It was about standing out at precisely the right moment. She'll be speechless, Ethan said, offering his arm. That's the plan, I murmured. Instead of our usual Uber, a sleek black town car waited outside our apartment, arranged by Jessica, who'd thought of every detail. The driver held the door as we slid into the leather interior. This is fancy, Ethan commented, looking around. Special occasion? The biggest charity event of the season deserves a proper entrance, don't you think? The gala was being held at the Legion of Honor, its neoclassical columns illuminated against the night sky. A red carpet stretched from the curb to the entrance, where photographers captured arriving guests. As our car pulled up, I took a steadying breath. Ready? Ethan asked. I've never been more ready for anything in my life, I replied honestly. The moment we stepped onto the carpet, I felt a shift in the atmosphere. People who had previously looked through me now did double takes. I recognized the subtle calculations happening behind their eyes, reassessing, recategorizing, wondering if they'd missed something important about Ethan's previously unremarkable girlfriend. Inside, the museum's court of honor had been transformed into an elegant wonderland. Neuroteca's touch was evident everywhere, from the interactive digital displays showcasing the foundation's work to the subtle lighting that shifted with the evening's rhythm. The technology was cutting-edge but unobtrusive, exactly as I'd specified. Victoria spotted us immediately. She wore a red Valentino, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, a fixed smile that faltered slightly as she registered my appearance. Ethan, darling, she called, approaching with the careful gait of a woman in too high heels. And, Leah? My goodness, you clean up rather. She paused, her eyes cataloging the unmistakable quality of my attire and jewelry. Well, thank you, Victoria, I said warmly. What a beautiful event you've created. The foundation should be proud. Her eyes narrowed slightly, trying to solve the puzzle I presented. Yes, well, We've been fortunate with our new anonymous benefactor. The entire event has come together magnificently." "I can see that," I replied, glancing around. "The technology integration is particularly impressive." "Isn't it?" Victoria preened, taking credit she hadn't earned. "My idea, actually. We must evolve with the times." I bit back a smile. "How forward-thinking of you." Throughout the cocktail hour, I felt Victoria watching me. I circulated easily, greeting board members by name, discussing the Foundation's initiatives with knowledge that clearly surprised them. Years of navigating tech industry events had taught me how to work a room, and tonight, I was using every skill in my arsenal. Ethan stayed close, his hand often finding the small of my back, his expression a mix of pride and confusion. "When did you learn so much about the Foundation?" he whispered during a brief moment alone. "Research," I said simply. "I wanted to understand what matters to your family." The dinner itself was flawless, the precision of money well spent. Between courses, Victoria made her way to the podium, resplendent in her confidence. "Welcome, friends and benefactors," she began, her voice carrying across the hushed room. "Tonight represents the culmination of our year's work and the beginning of even greater impact for underserved children in our community." She spoke at length about the Foundation's accomplishments, subtly centering herself in each success story. I watched her in her element, commanding, certain of her place in the world. "And now," she concluded, "I'm delighted to introduce our Foundation chairman, Harold Winters, with a special announcement." Harold, a distinguished man in his 60s, took her place at the microphone. "As many of you know, our gala faced unexpected challenges this year when our longtime technology sponsor withdrew. We feared scaling back significantly until," he paused for effect, "an anonymous guardian angel stepped forward with a donation of $250,000. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This benefactor asked for no recognition, no naming rights, nothing but the satisfaction of supporting our mission. However, they did request to be present tonight." Harold scanned the room. "And now, they've agreed to allow me to publicly thank them." Victoria stood to the side, eagerly awaiting the revelation of her mysterious savior, undoubtedly expecting some reclusive billionaire or society figure she could add to her collection of useful connections. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce the investor who saved this gala." Harold's voice rose with genuine emotion. "Please welcome Ms. Leah Morgan of the Morgan Family Trust." The room fell silent, then erupted in applause as I rose from my seat. Victoria's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor, though no one noticed in the commotion. I walked to the podium with measured steps, feeling the weight of every eye, especially Victoria's, as I took my place in the spotlight. "Thank you, Harold," I said into the microphone, my voice steady and clear. "I'm honored to support a cause so close to my family's heart." As I spoke briefly about the importance of arts education, my eyes found Victoria's stunned face in the crowd. She stood frozen, champagne seeping around her Louboutins, her expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror as the pieces clicked into place. The remainder of my speech passed in a blur of perfect poise and carefully chosen words. I spoke about digital equity and arts education, the importance of technological literacy, and my foundation's commitment to the cause. What I didn't mention was the stunned woman in red who couldn't take her eyes off me. The woman who, until moments ago, had dismissed me as an inconsequential gold digger. As I stepped away from the podium, the room erupted in applause once more. Board members who had previously ignored me now pressed forward, business cards extended, invitations flowing. I navigated the sudden attention with practiced ease, accepting congratulations while scanning the crowd for the two people who mattered most. Ethan stood where I'd left him, his expression a complex mixture of surprise, confusion, and something that looked remarkably like pride. Our eyes met across the room, and I gave him a small smile, part apology, part promise. We would talk later. He deserved the full story. Victoria had disappeared. I excused myself from a circle of admirers and made my way to Ethan, who immediately took my hand. "Leah," he said quietly, "what just happened?" I believe I've been introduced to your mother's social circle, I replied. He shook his head, still processing. The Morgan Family Trust? The $250,000? All this time. We should talk somewhere private, I suggested. He nodded, leading me toward a small auxiliary gallery that had been closed for the event. Once alone, I turned to face him, suddenly uncertain. This was the moment I'd been avoiding for over a year, the reveal that might change everything between us. I'm still the same person, Ethan, I began. Are you? His voice wasn't accusatory, just genuinely questioning. Because the woman I've been living with shops at outlet stores and worries about splurging on takeout. The woman on that stage just donated a fortune without blinking. I took a deep breath. I've been investing in tech startups since college. I got lucky with a few early bets, companies that went from garage operations to household names. By 30, I had more money than I knew what to do with. I paused, gauging his reaction. But I also had a string of relationships that fell apart once my net worth became the main attraction. Understanding dawned in his eyes. So, when we met, I wanted to be sure you were interested in me, not my bank account. I never lied about who I was, just what I was worth. Ethan was silent for a long moment. All those times my mother insulted you, made you feel small? I could have shut her down at any point, I acknowledged. But that would have been about money, not respect. I wanted her to see my value beyond dollar signs. So tonight was what? Revenge. I shook my head. A lesson, maybe. Or just the truth, finally. Your mother's foundation does good work, Ethan. I would have supported it eventually, regardless of our personal dynamics. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know whether to be angry you kept this from me, or impressed by your restraint. Both are valid, I said softly. I'm sorry for not telling you sooner. The longer it went on, the harder it became to find the right moment. Before he could respond, the gallery door opened. Victoria stood in the entrance, her perfect composure visibly shaken. I'd like a word with Leah, she said stiffly. Alone, please. Ethan looked between us, hesitating. It's okay, I assured him. We'll be right out. After he left, Victoria and I regarded each other in silence. For once, she seemed at a loss for words. You must think you're very clever, she finally said. Not particularly, I replied. Just fortunate enough to be underestimated. She moved further into the room, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Why the charade? Was it all to humiliate me? No, Victoria. It was never about you. I kept my voice gentle but firm. When I met Ethan, I didn't know you existed. And by the time I met you, I was already in love with him. So tonight's spectacle was perhaps unnecessary, I conceded. But after being treated like an interloper in Ethan's life for a year, I wanted you to understand something important. I chose your son when I thought he had nothing to offer but himself. Can you say you would have made the same choice for him? The question hung between us, unanswered. How much? She finally asked. How much are you actually worth? I smiled. That's still the wrong question, Victoria. She flinched slightly, then straightened her shoulders. I may have misjudged certain aspects of your character. It was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get. I decided to accept it. We all make mistakes, I said. The question is whether we learn from them. Victoria studied me with new eyes, not warm, certainly not maternal, but recalibrated. You're not what I expected for Ethan. No, I agreed. I'm better. Because I see him, not his family name, not his potential earning power, just him. A complicated series of emotions crossed her face. He loves you very much. And I love him. That's the only truth that's ever mattered. She nodded curtly. We should return to the gala. People will talk. As we walked back toward the main hall, Victoria paused. The tech integration tonight. That was your doing? Yes. One of my earlier investments. It's impressive, she admitted reluctantly. The board is ecstatic. I accepted this olive branch for what it was. I have some additional ideas for the foundation's digital strategy, if you're interested. She gave me a sideways glance. I suppose it wouldn't hurt to listen. In the months that followed, Victoria and I developed a relationship that, while never warm, was built on a foundation of mutual respect. She stopped attempting to reconnect Ethan with Rebecca. I stopped hiding my expertise at foundation meetings. When Ethan proposed 6 months later, Victoria hosted our engagement party. She introduced me to her friends as my son's brilliant fiancé. She's revolutionizing how we approach digital philanthropy. Not once did she mention my money, and that, I realized, was its own kind of victory, one far more valuable than the revenge I'd once contemplated. Because in the end, what I wanted wasn't Victoria's humiliation. It was her recognition that worth isn't measured in dollars, designer labels, or social connections. It's measured in how we treat people when we think they have nothing to offer us. Some lessons come with a price tag. Victoria's cost $250,000. Money well spent, if you ask me.